Welcome back to Anno Talk, all things anodizing. My name is Mark Spencer, and I am our sales manager at Akron Anodizing here in lovely Plymouth, Minnesota. Great day out there, about 82 degrees, just absolutely gorgeous. Joining me as well is George O.
Hey everyone, this is George O from Quaker Houghton. I'm based here out of Alpharetta, Georgia, just north of Atlanta, and it is a balmy 91 degrees over here. It's hot. I'm glad you're enjoying your weather, Mark.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Absolutely.
And finally, the last person today is Tej Patel.
Hey everyone, this is Tej Patel. I'm a director at Tech Yvonne Metal Finishing Solutions. We're located here in Chicago and Lancaster, South Carolina. I too can explain the joy that is non-Arctic weather, which I'm very thankful for right now. So, looking forward to this conversation with Jack. Mark, why don't you get this thing going?
Absolutely. And today we're excited to have with us Jack Tetrault, president of Sanford Process Corporation. And what we're going to discuss is the steps of anodizing. Hey, Jack, how's it going?
Hey, it's going really well, Mark, George, and Tej. I'm glad to be asked to speak with you guys. It's quite an honor, and as you know, I'm a big AAC fan.
Well, we're so glad to have you again, Jack.
Absolutely.
My pleasure, guys.
Are you enjoying the fine weather in Rhode Island? The ocean
Yeah,
state?
actually, I heard how nice it was with you guys, but we've had great weather, although today it is raining, so it's a perfect day for me to be inside doing a podcast.
Yeah.
No, I heard fishing's actually better when it's raining outside.
Yeah, that's what I heard too, but you can't prove it by me, George.
Gotcha.
Fishing's only good if you're catching fish, George. That's the rule on fishing.
But fishing is always good, no matter what.
Yes.
So most of our listeners probably know that there are multiple steps in the anodizing process. At a minimum, there is usually cleaning, etching, deoxidation, anodization, and sealing, along with rinses between each step. Jack, before we dig a bit deeper into all the steps, let's talk about why we have all these steps. So Jack, what are the purposes of each step?
Okay. As you know, when you anodize in a product, you are actually not putting a coating on the anodize or on the aluminum, but rather you are building a film from the aluminum material. So we are forming aluminum oxide artificially through electrochemical methods. And to answer your question, you can't do that if there's any dirt or grime or grease on the aluminum surface. So soaping it to remove those types of materials is important. To mention, not only helps clean the surface, but it prepares it to get all the natural oxidation that forms on aluminum off, and followed by a deoxidation step, which means when the pot comes out of that bath, the aluminum is very clean and no oxides on that. And that's a piece of material then to begin the anodizing process and building that perfect aluminum oxide layer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then once we build that aluminum oxide, then you have a couple other steps, and we didn't mention one of them, which is coloring, correct?
You froze on me, Mark. Sorry.
Okay, so no worries. So once we build that anodic coating, then we have these pores. We can then decide if we want to have clear or colored anodized, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. If you want to dye the pot either organically or inorganically, There are many colors available that will, fill the pores without electricity, just by an immersion process into these dye baths to form your color. And then, of course, as you mentioned, if you dye a part, then you want the pores, dye stays in and color lasts. And you can do the same if you choose no color with clear. But those are the standard steps that you would do in most anodizing, in particular, in this case, type 2.
Yeah, so you're saying we gotta, after you add that color, or even if you don't, you gotta have that seal step to make sure it doesn't corrode further.
Yeah, open pores, are pathways to corrosion, and also not good for the dye stability inside the pores. So sealing is a necessary step when you dye, and for corrosion resistance, even in a non-dye pot.
How fast does dye sort of I guess, fade out or bleed out if it's not sealed well?
Well, the fading really depends on what type of dye we're talking about. There are inorganic dye, let's say, where, let's say, Tej would be an expert in, which is like the old, we call it FAO, it's ferric ammonium oxalate or ferric sodium oxalate, which back in the day was called 4N, made from iron. If you dye with that, sealant is almost unnecessary because that color will last and last and last. But 99% of dyes today are organs. They're made from living organisms, and they will fade and they will lose their light fastness and change color over time, especially in the presence of ultraviolet light.
Yeah, Jack, you're absolutely right. So the inorganics are a little bit more tolerant of it, but yeah, the organic dyes will get eaten up pretty quick if there's no seal on those parts, whether it be UV light, temperature, etc. I kind of had a question for you. Are there ever situations where you don't seal an anodized coating, you leave it unsealed, or is that kind of few and far between?
No, that's it really depends on, again, requires not to jump to hard coat, but I will for this example. If you want to, in general, but let's just say with hard coat right now, if you seal a product, whether it's dyed or not, you get increased corrosion resistance. If you don't seal the product, you get increased wear resistance. So if you've got if you're hard coating a part that's, let's say, an engine piston, and you want to, as the customer, you care more about wear resistance than corrosion resistance, as you would with a piston. You don't want that sealed. So you would choose to not seal that part for the benefit that you want out of that anodizing.
Gotcha. Okay.
And with type 2, a lot of times people are looking more for the cosmetics of the anodize rather than the functionality, but so much so that they sometimes forget about the functionality regarding either a hardness or corrosion resistance, et cetera, et cetera. So there are different things you can do to manipulate the coatings and what you do to give the customer the best possible product that they could have.
Understood. Okay.
Jack, one of the things is also a step that's pretty important to consider is racking. How are we going to rack the parts?
Yeah, well, this is back to anodizing 101, but I find a lot of people miss that class. Yeah. And I think that, an improperly racked pot, I don't care what you're trying to do with it, you will not have good success. Racking is considered an art among anodizers, and most anodizers that I know and have met pride themselves on, don't see our rack methods. And as a person who's been in hundreds and hundreds of anodizing shops, I can tell you there's very little secrets. The real big secret is that the pot should be held tight with the ability to pass as much current through those contacts as you need to properly coat the pot. If you don't have that, you're doomed for failure. And one of the other problems that anodizers face is customers don't understand that, and they tell you where to rack and how to rack, and we try to comply with the customer's request. Pot or mess a pot or it falls on the floor, we're to blame. Yeah. And so racking has, if you don't start there, Mark, and it's a great point you bring up, forget the tanks. If it doesn't make it to the tank and it falls on the floor or burns off, then you've failed. So racking is an essential, critical part of the process.
So Jack, why can't they just put a hole in the aluminum and we hang it like plating?
Well, that's a great question. Well, you have to have positive contact. So for the folks out there listening who may not understand that, anodize is a non-conductive coating, meaning you can't pass. I won't say can't, but it's harder and harder the thicker the anodize gets. And therefore, let's say you're holding the inside of an aluminum tube and you begin the anodize process. If that tube were then to turn a 1/4 inch, now the contact points are laying on anodized product because it was being anodized. That process will actually stop because it's not touching raw aluminum anymore. So it's critical that the pot cannot move off of those initial contacts.
Right.
So if you were to hang it on a wire, Mark, as you mentioned, and you put it in a bath with vegetation and tank and all the pumps going and the solution moving, it's going to wiggle around and it will not anodize.
And when it arcs at the point of contact, it actually burns the aluminum.
Yeah, it can burn. And when you're talking about high current densities, like you use in hard coat, then you're likely to ruin the piece.
Very likely. That's as you look at the anodized process as we outlined it: racking, cleaning, etching, deoxidizing, anodizing, dyeing, sealing. Any optional steps in there?
Optional? You mean for the anodizer? Yeah.
For the anodizer, right? Do they have to go through? Do we have to go through every step?
Oh yeah, there are things you can do on the line to enhance your quality regarding let's call it acid bleed out or chemical entrapment or rinsability, because you don't want to carry one chemistry into another tank except the rinse tank. So so proper rinsing and getting that all the chemistry out prior to going into the next tank is pretty important the anodized line and the ultimate quality of the product. So yeah, there are things you can put in the line that will help you, and there are good ways to get out the sulfuric acid, which a lot of anodizers struggle with.
Yeah. Absolutely right. Absolutely. And that rinse. Did you ever take a rack from the etch to the desmut tank? No rinse?
If you do that, you'll only do it once.
Yeah, I know that, but
it's not pretty.
No. Acid to a base, you figure it out. You get a bunch of sludge on that surface. So, okay. Jack, how familiar are you between caustic and acid etch?
Well, listen, they have benefits. Both have their own. I think acid etch was a great invention, especially for when you want to get these these matte looks very, I'll call them dull, if you will, but I don't know if dull's the right word, but certainly matte finish without losing a lot of material. The aluminum, the sodium hydroxide from the etch tanks tends to chew up the aluminum, at a controlled rate. But as George will tell you, the metal removal is much greater in a caustic etch than an.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So if you're dealing with tight tolerance extrusions, you might want to consider an acid etch over a caustic etch.
Yeah. Anytime. Again, I think that you need to look at all the features and options, Mark. So if you've got an extrusion, you say tight tolerance, machine parts can be even worse for that type of coater. But you also got to remember what you're adding with the anodized coating itself. There are times where caustic etch is advantageous if you're going to hard coat and you're building up greater thicknesses, and you want to keep the pot as close to neutral as possible as far as dimensions.
What's your opinion on depth of build between nominal class 2, type 2 coating penetration of type 3?
I'm sorry, Mark, you froze halfway through. Please ask again.
Let's try it again. What's your opinion of the anodic coating penetration into the aluminum of a type 2 versus type 3, or do they penetrate equally?
No, they do not penetrate equally. And given all things being equal, so we're going to talk about standard classic hard coat. The rule of thumb is 50% of the coating thickness is built above the surface. And I'll go into that a little bit more. But with a standard, and this is like a wild card because so many people anodize so many different ways. So I'll only talk about proper type 2 anodizing, where you're going to anodize at 12 to 15 amps per square foot of aluminum. You're probably going to build up only about 1/4 to 1/3 of the coating thickness, and that really depends on also the temperature of your anodic coating bath. That also is a factor in that. And there are many factors in buildup, but those are the general rules of thumb.
That's right. Good. That's excellent feedback. Thank you, Jack. In your experience, and you mentioned earlier you've been to several anodized shops, and not only several, but hundreds.
Yes, I'm fortunate. I have a lot of friends. And they still let me in. It's amazing. Yeah.
And you still sound like you did 20-some years ago. So the chemicals you've been breathing in, not too bad.
I think I went gray back around 25, Mark. So I've been gray. I'm not bald. I've been gray for like 40 years. I don't know what happened.
It's not anodizing, that's for sure.
Oh, well, I don't know.
What steps do you think people tend to underestimate the importance of in the overall anodizing process?
Oh, wow. Great question. I probably have several answers, but, what I always tell people, I see rinsing in all plating steps, whether it's anodizing or regular, gold plating or something like that. Rinsing is always the most important step. However, I would say that a lot of people will ignore what's happening in their actual anodized tanks and how the coating is formed and what you need to do to build that coating properly. Improper temperatures, improper concentrations, aluminum too high, too low, not enough current density, or I'd never see not enough current density, all affect how the coating is formed and therefore the quality of the pot you're giving to the customer and what that coating then how it can perform based on the way the pores were formed and the thickness you allowed or you created with your process. So I'd love to see Anodize take a deep dive into their anodizing tank and not literally, but really understand what's happening.
So it sounds like people aren't really so much like underestimating the importance of like most of the steps, as they're just not being careful enough with the steps that they do care about.
George, I don't know. I don't think anybody that I've ever met is doing these things on purpose. I think the reason I mention the rinse tank, sometimes it's geography. They say, oh, my customer wants, orange, and we don't have orange in our line, so we're going to put orange, but I have to give up a rinse tank. And so they have fewer and fewer rinses, and so that they're trying to maximize what they can do, and it's all good intention, but limiting rinses and how you rinse is critical, and I think they lose the importance of that. But when I'm talking about the anodized tank itself, I'm sad to say that I think there's a lot of folks out there who aren't digging what's happening in there and how they can affect and manipulate their coating to add to the advantage of the customer.
Okay. Yeah, that's something we try to do at the AAC, right? Just be like, this is how your anodizing tank parameters will help you control what your coating is like. And I don't know.
Yeah, no, George, that's true. At the AAC, I think, over the years, I've certainly have talked to a lot of people about, problems they have and have asked them to look at, A, B, or C and what they're doing, and with great results. And, we meet at the AAC. When I talked to you last time, I said, you meet these people and everybody's open and being fresh, and you can understand the feedback you're getting, and you can save a lot of money and time. So, the AAC we're there to help each other.
So, you probably have a good perspective on this, but like, are the people who go to the AAC already more likely to care about this sort of thing? Like, do you notice that like customers or people that you visit who don't go to the AAC are the ones who are less likely to care about that sort of thing? Or is it like there's no correlation at all? It's just like completely random.
Yeah, I think it might be random.
Okay.
Anodizers there who really know their game, who unfortunately don't participate at the AAC. Don't anybody in this world get mad at me for this, guys, whoever's listening. But, my sense sometimes is people think that, again, that they have all the best secrets and they think they're going to have to share everything, and they don't want to send an employee that might spill something. But truthfully speaking, in my life, I haven't seen that many secrets. I've seen some great ideas, but I don't think it gives them that big an advantage where, the anodized world can share those ideas. I really don't see that. I think the anodizers ability from producing, high quality, even that the customer can't see, and building good relationships, then their racking method would, give them an advantage. So that's how I see it anyway.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Good. So Jack, let's ask this question, because I'm sure this has never happened to you in your career. Well, when a customer will say, "Oh, it's just aluminum, anodize it." Why is that a mistake?
Yeah, that's a big mistake. First of all, no anodizer should anodize any aluminum that they don't know what it is. If it's just aluminum, then that means it's just a problem.
Okay.
Is anodized differently at different rates. They have different properties of the aluminum, and therefore the anodic coating that is built out of the aluminum is certainly different. Contains different metals, etc. And with the wrong recipe, especially during high current density situations, such as you would use in hot coat, you can cause serious damage to that aluminum, or, not get the coating thickness you want, burn the pot, make a soft coating, make a coating that's, different thicknesses on different sides of the pots. And, even the material you rack with, you may want to consider when you're not knowing the alloy is and trying to coat it, is just a bad start, and therefore a bad finish.
Would you hang different alloys, whether it's a 3003 sheet, 5052 sheet, 6063 and 6061? Would you put them all in the same rack, or would you run them separately?
That's a great question. I think that typically what we have done over the years is try to run only like alloys together. Have we bent that rule on occasion? Yeah. If you have a wide open spec where let's say they want it, within a range of 3/10 to 7/10, and the product is going to be hanging on a wall up 50 feet in some museum, and it just has to be clear, then you can, look at, running maybe 5052 with 3003 or 6061. But in general, that's a slippery slope and bad habit to get into. I won't say it can't be done, because it certainly can, but it's good practice to run only like alloys together.
Yeah, very much so. Concur. Absolutely concur. Jack, so I think what we've identified here are that each step is critical in its own way. Would you agree?
Sorry, Mark, you froze again, bud.
Each step of the anodized process is unique and has its own purpose, and are important.
That is true. Yeah, and I think we basically covered each one, and skipping or altering them, or thinking the time in each tank or whatever the recipe you formulate is important. It is. There are reasons, and your chemical suppliers, and I'll talk to Tej and George about this. Certainly your chemical suppliers would be a little bit agitated with you if you're not listening to what their prescribed, running conditions are.
Yeah, if we're telling our customers, like, with these chemicals, you gotta have it in this tank for that long. You gotta do like this amount of rinsing. Like, if they don't follow it, we're like, man, like, we can only help. You gotta help us help you.
That's right. Yeah, it's like Tej when they wanna let's say run a red dye, and you tell them it's got to be 130 degrees, and you go in there and they got it at room temperature.
Jack, you'd be surprised how many customers I have to talk to about that. But yeah, it's not rocket science. You're right.
No, but it happens, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Listen, every chemical that I ever use, we ask, what are the operating ranges for this, and why are you do that? And then we ask questions from there. Well, can we do this if we wanted to? What's wrong with education? And who knows better than the guys who are providing the chemistry?
Yep. Absolutely. So, Jack, how difficult is it to troubleshoot an issue that happens with the anodic coating? Right? It comes off the line, and you don't get the right film build, or you're getting variation piece to piece. What's that troubleshooting process like?
So I think that's a difficult question to answer, but I'll do my best. The reason it's difficult is because just the fact that something went wrong makes you stop for the investigation, right? And what investigations are like. You want to question the operators who always tell you they did it exactly as they were supposed to, right? And I love my operators, but you have to build this rapport the troubleshooting team with the operator so that they will not be afraid to let you know if they had to take you just want total honesty out of your team. And depending on the problem and depending on the situation, that investigation could be very simple or it could be very long and tedious to figure out what's happening, because as anodizers, as we just talked about, it all starts with the base metal and then the racking. And you need to have every step go perfect. And, there's a whole fight that happens between anodizer and metal suppliers that says, the anodizer screwed it up. No, we had bad product to start with. And that truth, as usual, lies somewhere in the middle. And I've seen them all. I've seen them both. So but I think building a good rapport with your team, the investigative team, in my case, the quality engineers, really have to have a good rapport with the crew to find out in detail every step of the way and to analyze, where this problem could have, came from.
All right. Thanks so much, Jack. I mean, you've given us, and the listeners, a lot to think about. It's sort of interesting, sort of looking into the sort of the mindset and how you're thinking of about when you're telling people, you've got this problem, this is how you fix it. They're not sort of seeing this entire thought process. They just see you coming in out of nowhere and saying hey, you're doing everything wrong. You guys suck. And I guess that's what it can feel like for some people, right?
Yeah, that's right. And that, unfortunately, that's another bad thing the anodized industry did is we shot ourselves in the foot with the outward appearance we have put towards our customers. And it's unfortunate that, they think of us as a bunch of uneducated people wearing rubber boots and walking around. And it's really not the way, but,
Yeah.
Young guys like you, George, I have all confidence in the world will change that perception in the world. And
well, thank you, Jack.
and I think, I'm serious. The young generation, the new blood will make anodizers and all coaters have a better understanding amongst the customer base and the technology that we actually provide.
Yeah, it's going to be a journey, but you know what? I think we're all going to have fun doing it. All right, and with that, I think that wraps up today. Thanks again so much for joining us, Jack.
Oh, it's my pleasure again, guys. Thank you, and anytime.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
This was Jack Tetrault talking about some of the steps of anodizing. And once again, these are your hosts, George O.
Mark Spencer.
Tej Patel.
All right, and that was Ano Talk, all things anodizing.
Yeah. All right.
All right, see you guys next time.
Nice job.
Second, sorry, Dave.
Oh.